Let's go, girls.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Dragonus Podcastus. We have a very special episode for you. My name is Tiffany, and man, I feel like a woman today. Shout out to one of my favorite singers out there, Shania Twain, who is actually Canadian, believe it or not. Anyway, if you guys want to support us through the podcast, you can do so through Patreon, the Fiverr page, and Lady Maeve's School of Dysfunctional Dice. Lady Maeve, tell them about the school.
Welcome, adventurers, to our podcast today. Are you looking for a place for your kids to learn how to play D&D with kids their own age? Are you looking for an adventure to join or to learn how to play as an adult? Do you want to learn how to become a DM for your own group? Well, I've got the classes for you. If you're between the ages of 7 and 16, you can click on the Outschool link below this web podcast. If this is your first class on the Outschool platform, you'll get a $20 credit towards your first class or game. If you're between the ages of 16 to adult, you can click on the Start Play link to join one of my many ongoing games or request a private game or class. Private sessions are available for entire playgroups or individuals and make great gifts for your forever DM who would also like to play every once in a while. From one-shots to ongoing adventures, I have a variety of games for all play styles. You can also check out the Etsy shop for one-of-a-kind handmade adventure companions and gear. So what are we doing today?
So this week's episode is very special. We are talking about badass women in media, not strictly in fantasy. I've had this episode actually planned for a while, but we never got around to doing it. We are actually going to be branching out in this case. And I've put together 10 characters that we both agree are the most badass women ever. And we're going to talk about why they're badass to us, why they're super special. And this mostly comes down to how they're written and their deeds more than being a pretty face. And how they deal with some of the stipulations surrounding some of the tropes.
It was pretty hard to get down to these 10, so we possibly have more content for a later day. But first, some ground rules. The first question we asked ourselves is, what qualifies a woman in fiction to be badass? And we came up with a few answers. They can do tasks or have jobs normally associated with male characters in the time period that they appeared in. Agency cannot be taken away. It can be at risk, but not taken away. A male character who is a badass themselves might give the woman in question their respect or say, hey, she's a badass. They have done an act that no other character has done or is willing to do. Or they must have an interesting arc or an interesting premise behind them.
They also can, save and fight for themselves. They are allowed to be saved by another character only if the situation is inescapable or if they cannot figure a way out. Self-confidence is a big one here. They challenge the stereotypes surrounding women characters or put male characters who question their ability in their place. They can be a main character, a romantic interest, a secondary main character, supporting character, or even the villain in some cases. Now, there are some rules here that do not qualify. One of them is sexuality being the main trait. And they have to rely on the male character in order to stand out. The best example being the Bond girl. But there are exceptions to this. Or they fall into a stereotype or a generalization. So think ditzy blonde or, basically anytime you see a stereotype for women and the character inhabits that, it doesn't qualify here.
We do have a few exceptions that we have allowed. Even though looks are not everything, a character can be attractive and kick-ass. The characters don't see their sexuality as a negative or even a demeaning trait. They don't see that aspect at all. They just see the person. The male rescues the woman, and then the woman can turn around and rescue the male from his own problems. They might have some sass or attitude. That's always appreciated. And sexual orientation and ethnicity can play a role in some way, but it's not required. But again, we're looking for women who usually break the stereotype of, screaming sidekick. That's just there for eye candy.
Yeah. So we do have a couple of honorable mentions before we get started with the list. The first one is Charlie's Angels, depending on which version we're talking about. You can't have, there is the 70s one. But we are specifically looking at the one with Cameron Diaz, Lucy Liu, and Drew Barrymore. Uh, the Angels come just shy of the 10 because they often use their sexuality as part of the scheme to get the MacGuffin or get information. A more kid-friendly example would be the Totally Spies, which is basically a spy version of this. Um, the exception to the Bond girl thing we were talking about before is one of them is actually Tracy. Tracy from Her Majesty's Secret Service is the only person, or only woman who's actually officially married Bond in canon and keeps him grounded. And Diana Ross also enhances the best scenes between her and George Lazenby, which, fun fact, George Lazenby, that film was his first official movie. The only other time acting he ever did was in a chocolate commercial. And his best scene actually comes at the end of the movie just after Tracy gets killed. It's a really good it's a really good scene. The other one is Natalia from Goldeneye. She is a key element of the plot. She actually identifies one of the villains as the one who stole the MacGuffin, and she was actually a witness at the massacre scene. She actually plays a role in stopping Sean Bean's scheme, and she also kind of self-aware about Bond and, his whole thing about blowing stuff up. What is it with you and moving vehicles? Well, don't just stand there. Get us out of here. Yes, sir. And yeah, she's awesome too. And, she, backhands the programmer guy, which is a lot of fun. And then finally, we have our sweet Southern Belle, Rogue. We are specifically talking about her from the X-Men cartoon. She literally has the touch of death, kiss of death, or touch of stealing your powers. And she can casually one-shot a Sentinel. And she actually managed to have a decent relationship with Gambit. Woo! I'm about to make a name for myself. Yeah. And, unfortunately, Red Sonja, we discussed this in private too. She's an honorable mention. She's disqualified because of one reason, which is the outfit. Lady Maeve, do you want to elaborate?
Yes. So Red Sonja came out with the Conan series back in the 70s and 80s. And in her time period, she was a great example of a badass character and a woman who could hold their own in the fight. But unfortunately, the character design was a victim of the 70s and 80s art style called chicks in chainmail. Basically, bikini armor. If we could put her in a more functional armor suit, then she would definitely be in the top 10. And for those of you who would like to turn that trope on its head, there's a great book series out there called Chicks in Chainmail, where they take the trope of that art style, turn it on its head, and the women kick butt throughout the entire short stories.
So we have two more honorable mentions. One of them is 709. I actually consider putting Janeway on this list, but I prefer 709. But she loses points because her outfits, which were meant to crank up the sex appeal. However, in the universe, it's explained that the suit she wears, they simulate her wearing her exoplaning when she was a Borg drone. She gets massive points though for dual wielding two phaser rifles after she mercy kills Icheb, and she manages to hold off the Borg invasion aboard the Titan. God help you if you try to harm Naomi Wildman though. And she actually becomes the new captain of the new Enterprise G, which I thought that was a great progression of her character. And also because she actually does have a really good character arc. It's just kind of a shame that Voyager's writing is not the greatest. And it took basically introducing this new character in the fourth season to really bring it up to new levels. And then finally we have the Charmed ones, which are Prue, Phoebe, and Piper from the original Charmed series, not the new one. So Prue is the leader, quote unquote, but she has that problem in the first season of basically, telling her love interest that she's a witch until the end of the first season, which really comes back to bite her because, spoilers, he gets killed by a demon. She has the casual telekinesis, which in the first season she would squint in order to do it, but then eventually she got upgraded so that she could just move her hand. And also she has the astral projection, which she is an upgrade to her powers. You got Phoebe, who is played by Alyssa Milano. The thing about Phoebe that I realize is that despite the fact that she has her whole premonition thing, it's more of a passive thing, and it's also a thing to get the plot going, basically. But thankfully, when she gets her upgrade, she can levitate, and she can dodge energy balls casually, and she is the only one that I know of out the three that is actually skilled in martial arts. Piper is all sass. She can slow things, she can blow things up. She married a white later and had two kids. She is 100% sassy. The first time I saw her like blow things up was when she accidentally blew up a watermelon. She's just standing there crying. And another thing that really bugged me about her relationship with Leo is that there's a one scene where she's about to kiss him and then he orbs away. And I'm like, did you just do that? Oh man, you are gonna get in so much trouble when you come back. It's like Piper was the sassy one. And also she when I think it was a future version of Chris, like she says, "Don't make me ground you." And it's like, yeah, she does that. I was considering putting Paige on here, but Paige is a weird one, and honestly, some of the writing surrounding her is not very good, unfortunately, especially in her debut episode. Anyway, so let's go on with the list. All right, so who do we have first on our docket?
All right, so we have picked 10 characters. They are not ranked in any particular order. First, we have Dana Scully from The X-Files, Wonder Woman from the Justice League cartoon, the Linda Carter 1970s TV show, and Gal Gadot from the movies, Xena, Warrior Princess, Colonel Samantha Carter, Ellen Ripley.
And then for the other half, the other five, we have Nancy Drew, Leia Organa Solo Skywalker. Yes, that is her full official name. And Padme Amidala by extension, or Padme Nibiru if you want to get technical. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and Scarlet from the G.I. Joe comics and cartoon. So first up is Dana Scully. Why is she badass?
All right, Dana Scully was from the X-Files TV show, and she actually has an effect and a trend named after her called the Scully effect. Because of the popularity of the show and the fact that this character was so based in science, it was an inspiration for women and girls everywhere to go into careers in STEM professions, so science, technology, engineering, and math. A similar trend is the Uhura effect from the Star Trek series. Dana was the one who looked at the science angle in all of the cases covered in the show. A lot of women, after airing the show, went into criminal science jobs and crime lab jobs after the show aired. She was inspired, according to her creator, by his favorite sportscaster, Vin Scully, and also Jodie Foster's performance of Clarice in Silence of the Lamb. She grounds Mulder, her male partner, quite a bit, and they have good chemistry together. She is the voice of reason, and he is the voice of conspiracy, and together they solve cases.
Which are the quote-unquote supernatural, which there's always a logical answer to these cases. Speaking of the crime lab, crime fighting business, there was two others that I was thinking of. Beckett from Castle. She is a fun character. She really, like, her and Castle have amazing chemistry. And then there's Olivia Benson from Law & Order SVU. Though you could argue against that, but anyway. So our next bit is Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman is a big inspiration for a lot of women out there and little girls too. She is a massive symbol of empowerment, and she describes herself as the ambassador to man's world. She also sees that man's world doesn't necessarily need fixing, but it needs to adjust to be more accepting of change and more responsive to the ideals of love and peace and acceptance. When it comes to the Justice League specifically, she is love and empathy and compassion. She is that aspect of the team.
In the 1980s, so the first show came out in the 70s, there was a cartoon in the 80s, and now we have the modern movie. In the time period of the 70s and 80s, as a kid growing up in that time period, it was very refreshing to have a show where a woman was not just a sidekick. She was her own superhero. She was kicking butt and taking names all by herself, fighting villains and crime and winning the day. And, there were male leads in her show, but they were the sidekicks. It was nice to have a woman in the forefront of the superhero business for once.
Yeah, and just kind of pointing this out here, when when Linda Carter is not doing Wonder Woman, she's kind of like the secretary role, which was a common thing back then. But I think the glasses specifically, it kind of add to the attraction and the, being the pretty face kind of thing, but it doesn't really hurt the character. That's the interesting part about it, and that's the same thing with Gal Gadot, which we'll get into in a minute. But as I said before, empathy is her most defining character trait. There is actually a comic that I used to have where she literally like dives in front of a group of women who are basically being oppressed, and she literally like blocks it all of it with her bracers. And Superman kind of says, well, if you want to make a difference, instead of like openly like showing yourself, you should do it in more subtle ways. This was at a time when they wanted to make the characters a little more grounded and more, well, human. Um, and basically, Wonder Woman doesn't allow herself to sit by and watch people suffer. And her love and desire to spread peace and love to the world makes her who she is. And in the movie Justice League Doom, when Batman creates his whole contingency about how to neutralize the Justice League if they ever went rogue or went bad, he specifically states that Wonder Woman is the toughest because she is one of the best fighters, and it's very difficult to get a beat on her and discover her weaknesses because she has very few. The whole thing about the lasso of truth thing, we're not going to go into here about its origins, but in modern day, if anybody is able to, get her tied up in the lasso, she can't break out of it. It doesn't have to be a man. It could be anybody. But back in those days, in the early days, it was specifically a man because of the origins of her creator, which we're not going to get into here because it's a family-friendly show sometimes. She is also, a founding member of the Justice League, and she gets a lot of respect from everybody, not just Batman, but Superman, Martian Manhunter, Flash, Green Lantern. And she, as I said before, she is one of the best. She is the best fighter among the league, next to Black Canary, and this has been stated by Batman of all people. And there have been many depictions of Wonder Woman over the years. Well, you've got Linda Carter, who is the original, and she made the Wonder Woman spin popular, which is what a lot of little girls did back in the day when they had the costume, which I thought was really interesting. You've got Susan Eisenberg, who was from the cartoon, and believe it or not, Lucy Lawless, who we're going to get to later, actually did voice Wonder Woman in one of the movies. But Susan Eisenberg brought the loving warrior and the compassion and gave us one of the best depictions of the Wonder Woman Batman dynamic, because in one of the episodes in Unlimited called This Little Piggy, Cersei turns her into a pig, and Batman has to do something that is so secretive and so, I guess you could call it debilitating in a way, in order to bring her back to normal, which is he has to perform a Frank Sinatra number, which shout out to the late Kevin Conroy for being able to do that just easily. And it's such a great scene. And I think if Batman didn't have Catwoman as his other love interest, he and Wonder Woman would go very well together. But then again, Wonder Woman does have Steve Trevor, so there's that. And then you've got Gal Gadot, who is the most recent actress. She brings a lot of the innocence, the kick-assness, and is also the courageous between Steve and her. And, there is the No Man's Land scene where she literally walks up and she starts running and she deflects a mortar shell with her shield. And can I just say right now, as I said before, when she arrives in London and she needs to blend in, the outfit that she wears, it only makes her stick out more. And then there's the alleyway scene, which is like where Steve kind of says, as they're about to shoot him, he goes, stand back. And then she steps in and just blocks it with her bracer. And she's like, And he's like, alrighty then, have at him. And I was like, yep, I'm behind that. And the no man's land scene. This is not what we came here to do. No, but it's what I'm going to do. That is Wonder Woman right there. And I think that Chris Pine and Gal Gadot's chemistry in that movie specifically, it makes the movie. And I love that a lot. And she also gets the most badass of the scores to come out of Wonder Woman's whole thing. And also, she saves Batman from getting incinerated by Doomsday. So, yeah, 100% badass.
And we can't mention Wonder Woman without mentioning her iconic jet. This jet is actually still put on display at air shows all around the United States. It's even been in the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum. Due to the fact that it's an invisible jet, the joke is normally they just put down a bunch of wheel chocks and put out a sign explaining the invisible jet and all its parts. Sometimes they'll put like a ladder, like it's up against a jet somewhere, so you could climb in and view the thing. But the running joke is just not really there because it's invisible. But yeah, I love the invisible jet mechanic. And her jet has been in the cartoon. Did they put it in the? Did it show up?
I believe they put it in the Justice League cartoon, but I believe it is invisible, but I could be wrong. I mean, it is in the Harley Quinn show, but that's kind of thing. Family Guy actually made a joke about it, which we're not going to repeat here because that's adult humor. But yeah, Wonder Woman is 100% a badass, and no matter what version, except for maybe the Injustice Wonder Woman, which we're not going to talk about here, she will always be a badass because of her love and compassion. Now, I will say her outfit, depending on which version we're talking about, does lose a couple points, but I don't think it really matters in the grand scheme of things. So let's move.
It helps that she was the main character, and she did inspire a lot of women and girls to go out there and fight for their rights.
Exactly. And that's what Wonder Woman is. She's a symbol of empowerment, but she's also a symbol for love and peace and all that good stuff. All right, so let's move on to probably my favorite of these women. Well, second favorite. Who's next up, Lady Maeve?
We have Xena Warrior Princess. This was a massive TV series in the past. It was connected to another TV show called Hercules, where Kevin Sorbo played Hercules and he went on adventures. She was originally a villain in that show, and I guess the character got such feedback from the audience that they decided to give her her own spin-off series. So basically in Hercules, she was a villain, she did bad things, and then decided through Hercules' actions and showing her the correct way that she was going to do good now. We're considering her not in D&D terms a fighter class, more of a monk fighter hybrid. She does a lot of kicking and punching. She does have a weapon. She does use it. She will throw it. It's almost like a frisbee, but it comes back. It's like a boomerang frisbee. She will kick people with her feet and fists. She'll tie them up. She'll punch them. She doesn't usually kill her opponents. And this show was on the air in a time where you did not show blood in action shows because kids were watching them. So, the hero would beat up the bad guys. They would be restrained. And then the police would come or the guards would come and take them away. She definitely earned her reputation as a badass. She had a sidekick named Gabrielle. That was kind of the voice of reason. She was the hothead. Gabrielle was the voice of reason. She would only pull a sword when she absolutely had to. Most time, she would punch people to get her point across. She's known for her backflips, her acrobatics, her war cry, and the chakram.
Which, I learned something about this weapon from Deadliest Warrior. The chakram is a Rajput weapon from ancient India. And I think they were, as you kind of pointed out, they were tending to go for a magical throwing weapon, but they realized how stupid it was, and also Link already had the boomerang, so they didn't want to do the boomerang. The funny thing about that chakram is, it actually, in the later seasons, it could actually split, and there's this really funny video where, like, It's like basically a clip show of every time she's like chucked that thing, and it bounced off of people's helmets. It's bounced off a turtle. It's done a pinball effect. It even took out a ballistic missile, which is a little ridiculous. But and it even got stuck in a wall. And as we said before, like she is well known for doing like the backflips, like it's in the intro. And again, with the outfit thing, at the time, this was fine, but also it was a reflective of the times because in the later season she did take on the Roman army, and it was reflective of the kind of armor that they wore. And also, it's funny because this was one of the first times that we had a same gender relationship, because later on, well, basically Xena and Gabrielle did actually become a couple. And we can't forget Xena without mentioning her best villain, which in my opinion was Calypso, who was one of her lieutenants when she was like a warlord princess. They don't really go into the whole like royalty of her being a princess. I think it's just more of a title, but she definitely earns the whole thing about like being able to like catch arrows and like she kicks a lot of butt. And the other thing I really like about this series is also there's an episode called, I believe it's called A Day in the Life, where it just shows them like in between the adventures. Like there's every time like Azita has like one of these crazy plans, it either like works spectacularly or it blows up in her face. Like they show her like trying to make a kite and trying to get it to go, and they also like have a running gag throughout that episode where like um Gabrielle is trying to sneak up on her, and like at the end when they're like laying down at the campfire, she pulls out her staff and hits her on the nose. And then there's also the part where like Gabrielle uses like her chakram to like fillet a fish, and she's like, "Great, now it's gonna smell like fish for days." And it's like that was the dynamic between the two, and I thought it was great. And also, Xena went through great lengths to keep Gabrielle safe, because I would argue that Gabrielle was kind of a bard because of the way, I think they even mentioned it in the show. I could be wrong there.
All right. Also, Xena has had such a huge impact on the geek community and geek culture that years and years after the show is over, you will still find people wearing the cosplay of Xena and Gabrielle and even Hercules at cosplays, Comic Cons, Ren fairs. There's usually like a Xena Hercules day at the Renaissance fairs in your area where everyone comes in costume from the show. Both Hercules and Xena had 6 seasons, so that was pretty even Steven. And to this day, everyone still enjoys the program. You just have to find it because it's no longer broadcast on TV.
I actually have the full series, believe it or not, and I have the Hercules series. So, and anyway, so our next contender here is none other than Colonel Samantha Carter. Now, if you don't know who she is, she's from the original Stargate. She was in the original movie not with Richard Dean Anderson, believe it or not. I believe the one who played Colonel Colonel Neal. It was who was his name? Not Keith Urban. It's somebody else. But anyway, so she started out on the team as a captain. Then she got promoted to major, which is a big leap. But this is the Air Force, so that's kind of a thing. And then she eventually made it to a colonel when O'Neill made it to general, which was a big thing in the time. And she basically said in the movie to O'Neill, "I don't care what you think of me. I won't put up with your crap," basically, because they kind of, O'Neill was kind of like apprehensive about having her on the team. She is a mechanical engineer, and she cracked several pieces of ancient technology. She made a Nakodum reactor, I believe. Um, she also basically invented the DHD, which is the dial home device, which is how they actually return from the worlds back home to the Stargate Command. That she played a big role in that, and she was the reason that they have that in the first place. She punched a system lord, which was Ball, who made a not so subtle sexist remark. So, and the fact that she wasn't completely disintegrated by that, and Ball was like, "Huh, okay, I'm going to let you have that kind of thing. And then during one episode when they were giving the free Jaffa gifts as weapons as gifts, O'Neill basically says to Carter, "Hey, demonstrate the effectiveness of the P90 because at the time the P90 was synonymous with Stargate because when they were originally shooting, they had like AR-15s, M4s, MP5s, and what would happen is the hot brass casings would actually hit the crew members. So the producer found out about the P90 because it had a downward ejection port, and they're like, "Hey, let's use this instead of this." They still have the M4s and MP5s and all that, but they were for the background soldier guys. Um, so she demonstrates it, and Teal'c says when the guy questions Carter's effectiveness, Teal'c of all people says she is a formidable warrior, and that's a lot of praise coming from Teal'c of all people. And let's not forget, during all 10 seasons, 10, 11 seasons, she had to go through a lot of stuff. Her father being diagnosed with cancer and then bonding with a symbiote. That was an easy process. She had to deal with Dr. Janet dying, which was not easy for the show. Also, Daniel dying and then ascending, all the while fighting a war with the Goa'uld and the Replicators. And she didn't let any of that slow her down. Also, the Replicators decided to create a replica version of her as kind of a face to the Replicators. I guess they respected her that much. And then O'Neill also deferred to her when it came to technology and mechanical stuff. And let's not forget the old MacGyver joke because Richard Dean Anderson was the original MacGyver. There's a behind the scenes stuff where Amanda Tapping basically makes a joke about MacGyver and says, "We have belt buckles and bubble gum, and you can make a reactor out of bubble gum, and you can't even get us out of this mess." MacGyver, more like McUseless. That was a behind the scenes stuff, and I thought that was I think that fits well with Carter's character. And also, she did take down that one super soldier by herself. Well, okay, granted, she did have help, but she had a hand in it, and she was the contributing factor behind taking out that one super soldier. So our next person is actually the only one that I know of so far that has only had one good movie depiction, and that's Nancy Drew. So Nancy Drew is the girl detective. She is she was one of my first one of the first book series I ever read. She is well respected by most people in River Heights, which is the town that it takes place in, which is in Chicago, I believe. And she often, when she teams up with the Hardy Boys, which is the opposite number to her, she often takes the lead in the cases unless, the Hardy Boys decide to take the lead. She has survived a god ton of near-death experiences, which Carolyn Keene, which is the author, he does this thing where at the end of the chapter, they have like a end of chapter cliffhanger where Nancy is like in a death-defying situation. And, well, she does manage to get out of it, but sometimes she does need help, and that's the inescapable situation we talked about. When she is confronted by the bad guy, she almost always is at least 2 steps ahead of them. Almost. Sometimes she's like maybe 1 step because the villain is a little bit smarter. She is versed in karate and judo. That is confirmed. I checked. Sometimes she just solves cases completely by herself and no backup, namely the Nancy Drew games that you can find on Steam, where she has very little in terms of backup. She is badass enough to have 4 different book series. She has the Kid Nancy Drew, the new Nancy Drew files, the original Nancy Drew files, and the original hardcover. Eat your heart out, Hardy Boys. You only had 1 good series. And when she does, help the Hardy Boys with their cases, she doesn't get shoved into the back seat. She often is the one that actually does put the pieces together. It does take the Hardy Boys quite a bit to catch up on that end of things.
Nancy Drew was kind of a jumping off point for a lot of books aimed at girls to read in the 70s and 80s. We get our Babysitters Club format from this, Stable Club, like any book series where it was you read the series, you never got the last chapter until you bought the next book. She kind of inspired that kind of style of serial adventures for the females of the time period. It is a very good book series. She is basically Girl Sherlock Holmes. It has passed the test of time and is still in print today, like we just said. It's a way that several generations of girls learned that they too could solve mysteries just like those boys. And I think she's kind of got one up on the Hardy Boys because, like you said, she's still in print. You can find reprints of their book, but her book is still getting stories added to the storyline.
And also, believe it or not, she actually had a really good movie version of The Secret of the Old Staircase. The actress who plays Nancy Drew is the same actress who plays the Wild Shape in the Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves movie. And I think she does a pretty good job conveying the what Nancy Drew would be like as like a teenager. I'm not even going to bring up the actual movie Nancy Drew because that is nowhere near the version of Nancy Drew that I know anyway. So, next up, uh, get the original ass-kicking badass who had survived 3 movies and is the quintessential horror movie, action movie heroine, Ellen Ripley. She is one of my heroes. So,
We love Ripley. So I would also consider this in the sci-fi category because Alien and then Aliens and then all the other movies was a groundbreaking movie of the time period. You had a crew of people stuck out in space. It's a horror movie. There's these giant bug monsters trying to eat them. And if I remember correctly, she was the only survivor from the first movie. Her
yes.
and the cat.
Yeah, her and the cat.
Okay. I won't say spoilers because there will be spoilers. And if you haven't seen it by now, it's been out for a few decades. So, go watch it if you haven't seen it. So Sigourney Weaver was the actress who played the part. She is a badass in of herself. I believe it was the second or third movie. They had an idea where all the people on the spaceship at that point or the space station had no hair. So
No,
she
it
actually,
was the
for the
third.
part, actually,
It was the third
the
movie.
third movie. Okay. The third movie. So she actually shaved her actual hair off for that role instead of using a bald cap. Her character Ripley survives all 3 movies into her official canonical death in Alien 3. Um, she harpoons one of the monsters, quote, the thing out of the goddamn airlock. And in this section, I apologize to our viewers. Ripley's section will have some language. This part we're probably going to rate PG-13 because some of the words she quotes. So if you have little ears listening, you might want to skip ahead until the next person so you don't hear them. But, most of these words are on normal TV now. She doesn't put up with the corporate line, the corporate crap, even after they ask her to go back to the spaceship as an advisor.
It was a
She
planet.
knows what's going on. Um, yep, the planet as an advisor. She knows what's going on. She's fought these horrible monsters before. Almost all of the Marines respect her, especially Hicks. Again, this is a platonic relationship. Remind me, did she have any romantic interests in any of the 3 movies, or
Uh,
was it all...
Actually, in the third movie, there was a blooming relationship with the Doctor, but then the Doctor gets taken out by the alien. Also, Apone, who is the sergeant, he actually like respects her enough to like say, hey, like even though you can drive a power loader, he kind of is like he's kind of impressed. And also, just a fun fact about one of the scenes in the med lab scene with the face huggers where they're attacking Newt and Ripley, Michael Bain, who is the one who plays Hicks, from what I've heard, when Hicks dives through the window, he actually did the stunt himself. There was no stunt actor. And also James Cameron said to Sigourney Weaver, hey, I've got an idea to, like, expand Ripley's story. And Sigourney Weaver was apprehensive about coming back to the role, but then Cameron convinced her because he also made T2, which is Sarah Connor's story. But and then also, she has her whole thing where, like, she's just one of the original badasses. And actually, I think this is more Maeve's thing, but she's awesome. Basically, she's one of my heroes too.
It's always cool to just have a main character that gets to play with the cool guns, the cool robots, gets all the fun toys. So she's a surrogate for Newt. She helps the Marines defend their position while Bishop gets the dropship to pick them up. So she's kind of like, she's in charge, large, badass, but she can also work with other people.
Yeah, and then, well, she also kind of keeps Hudson, played by the late Bill Paxton, and Bill Paxton is the only actor who has been killed by an alien, a Terminator, and a Predator. So take that how you will. But yeah, so she has, like, her whole thing where she's protecting Newt. She becomes the surrogate mom because Newt's parents are dead. They're dead. Okay, can I go now? Sorry, my British is very bad. But when Newt gets taken by the alien into the hive, she literally gears up and she says, I don't want to hear about it, Bishop. She's alive. There's still time. And she basically goes into the elevator with a ticking clock, basically, to save her. And then she finds Newt. They get to the nest and the queen. And there's like a bit where, like, the egg opens up. And it's like, she basically says she doesn't even tell the queen. She just uses the flamethrower. And the queen is smart enough to say, maybe you should screw with the lady with the flamethrower. But then the egg opens up. She has, like, that look. It's like, are you for real? So, anybody want some fried eggs? And she goes full out and takes out the entire nest by herself. Before the big nuclear explosion goes off. And then, we can't forget the legendary line that she has kind of become synonymous with. All together now.
Get away from her, you bitch!
I apologize.
She takes on the queen. Yeah, we did warn that this segment was PG-13. Jin takes on the queen alien with a power loader, and then shoves her out an airlock and basically spaces her so she dies. And she also helps the prisoners of Fury 161 defeat a kind of like a dog alien and goes out in a blaze of glory. And that is in canon where she dies, but time will tell. Maybe they'll clone her and bring her back or something. We don't know. The corporation is corrupt.
We don't
The corporation is very corrupt.
We don't talk about Alien Resurrection. But yeah, basically in the industrial cut of Alien 3, when, the chest burster, because she was infected in the opening of the movie, she grabs that little bastard and drags it down when she basically goes into the molten steel. And that's Ripley's story. She went out in a blaze of glory, Christ imagery and all. So now we have our big contender, our big lady here, Leia Organa Solo Skywalker. That's her full name, and by extension Padme Amidala. She gets her own section. So Leia is the reason that Ripley and Sarah Connor kind of exist. She is the most iconic out of all the women on this list, by and far. She is the daughter of the Chosen One and Darth Vader. If you haven't seen the original trilogy, just you've been living under a rock, basically. And her hairstyle, which is the buns, basically became iconic. I guess iconic would be kind of a downplay of that, and even when she was young in the Kenobi series, she was more sassy than Obi-Wan, which I have to say right now, the actress who plays Leia in the Kenobi series is perfect for portraying a younger Leia, because she literally, one of the first scenes she has is where her cousin, quote unquote, is talking down to 3PO and R2, which R2 would never let this slide, by the way. And he basically says, well, why do you treat your droids like humans? They're lesser beings. So then she says, well, I guess I don't have to. I guess I don't have to treat you like a human being. And it's like, damn. Even when she was 8 years old, she was being sassy. And she is the only one to give Vader any kind of sass and live to tell the tale. But granted, there was a little more going on behind the scenes about that whole thing. I want to know what happened to the plans they sent you.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm a member of the Imperial Senate on a diplomatic mission to Alderaan.
You are part of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor. Take her away. I did that a little too well. Which fun fact about that whole thing, James Earl Jones and Carrie Fisher had never met on screen when they were filming that whole thing. It was actually David Prowse in the suit. But Big Bang Theory kind of solved this problem by having them actually meet for the first time and doing a scene together. It's not funny anymore, James. Then why am I laughing? Ha ha. It's like, I'm glad that they got to meet in person, and goddamn, rest in peace, James Earl Jones. I hope you and Carrie are having some fun conversations. And
They're pranking everybody in heaven right now because
Pretty
that
much.
was their thing. They would prank back and forth. Even though they didn't really meet in person until they started doing like Comic-Cons and things. Carrie Fisher and my mind is blanking. Luke Skywalker's Mark Hamill.
Mark Hamill.
They would prank the set all the time. And poor Han Solo,
Harrison
played
Ford.
by the legend and icon Harrison Ford, would have no clue that anything was going on until the joke was sprung on him. All right, so Princess Leia was the sci-fi badass woman of my childhood. I was born in the time period that the first movie had come out. I grew up during the entire release of all the movies. When I was a kid, when we played Star Wars in the neighborhood, every girl wanted to play the part of Leia. She became the general of an entire generation of sci-fi women, girls, and men. A huge role model to all of us. Carrie Fisher, the lady who played Leia, was also a huge icon in the geek and nerd community. She is the patron saint of take your medication and say no when things are too much for you. She is a wonderful person. We miss her greatly. She has since passed away. She was a senator, a princess, and a general, and she held her own when it came to the male main characters.
And also because
Luke was supposed to be the main character, but it ended up being Leia who stole the scenes.
Pretty much. And because she is actually born to Padmé Amidala, who's a former queen, that does technically make her Naboo royalty. So she could technically be a queen. But we're not going to get into that. But, so, when Han and Luke's plan to break her out goes badly, she steps up and willingly jumps into a garbage chute. Into the garbage chute, flyboy. And I'm like, and Han and Luke are like, what did we get ourselves into? And it's like, yeah, that was Leia. And that was also Carrie Fisher in a nutshell behind the scenes, because when they were filming the first Star Wars movie, nobody had any idea what the hell was going on with the script. So Carrie Fisher basically became Leia in a sense and basically said, hey, why don't we do this line? Why don't we do this? And Lucas was like, okay, let's do it. And he was not open. He wasn't like, he was open to ideas. And I think Carrie had a big influence on how the movies were actually shot. And, she doesn't put up with any of Han's BS. And also, just their conversation is just hilarious.
I would rather kiss a Wookiee. I can arrange that. He could use a good kiss.
Poor Chewie. Man, he can't catch a break. But, as we said, she kind of becomes the lead. When Alderaan goes boom, she does become a leader, but not the leader of the rebellion. That's more Mon Mothma's thing. But she is a leader when it comes to the overall rebellion, especially in Empire, I think, and also a little bit of Return of the Jedi. And let's not forget the slave Leia outfit, which That thing is basically, it's a big giant bird to every stipulation that has surrounded women over the past 80 years. And in fact, she doesn't even let that whole compromising position demean her in any capacity. And she doesn't even let herself become defined by that, despite the fact that media has defined her by that outfit. In fact, she uses the tool of her oppression to kill Jabba. It's not Luke who kills Jabba, it's Leia, which is just badass in and of herself. It's basically saying, hey, I might be in a compromising position, but you put me there, and it's going to come back and bite you in the tail, so to speak. And yeah, it was an interesting time filming those films, and we're not going to get into all the details, but Leia is iconic for a reason. So much so that Disney made her an official Disney princess, and she
Is
the
now a Disney princess, yes.
the only thing is she's missing a song, but Leia's theme could count as a song. I don't know, and of course we have her mother, Padme Amidala, played by the lovely Natalie Portman. I love this actress 100%. So she was Queen of Naboo at 14 canonically. And let's not forget the little age gap of Anakin being 9 at the time, but we're not going to get into that. But she she was Queen of Naboo at 14. She led the resistance movement against the Trade Federation in the first movie. She's the one who comes up with the plan to capture the Viceroy, not the Jedi, not her captain, her. She is the youngest senator at the time to take the position of senator. She regularly carries a blaster pistol, especially in TCW. She has no problems fighting. She gives Liam Neeson, of all people, sass, which is not something you want to do. If it was, Samuel L. Jackson, you probably get in a lot of trouble for that. She is very loving and compassionate towards Anakin. We're not going to go into the darker details of that, but she's very loving and compassionate towards him. And on Geonosis, in the second movie, she actually is the one who gets herself out of her handcuffs by herself. She does a little bit of rogue lockpicking stuff. And she has no problems taking on, a Nexu, which is the cat-like thing that kind of scratches her. And over the course of the Clone Wars, the villains repeatedly try to intimidate or assassinate her, but they soon realize it's literally impossible to do this. How many times must we teach you this lesson, old man? And she has participated or is present during multiple battles, including the Battle of Geonosis, the Battle of Naboo. She was involved in a lot of battles, but she's more of the diplomatic side of things. She married the Chosen One. She formed the seeds of rebellion via the Delegation of 2000, which is a thing from the novelization and the deleted scenes. And then once Palpatine becomes Emperor in that very novelization, she actually advises Bail Organa and Mon Mothma to basically feign subservience while secretly building a resistance. So, in effect, she created the first scenes of rebellion. And also, just Natalie Portman. Natalie Portman is a treasure to the world, and I hope she does more movies. Especially, I hope she comes back for more Star Wars stuff, because I would really like to see that. So,
And
next...
this might be a very unpopular opinion about Padme, but I think, I hate to say this, but I think the movie would have been awesome if Anakin Skywalker wasn't in it. Like, if it was just centered on her storyline, it would have been really good.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair. But then again, the prequels were technically the origin of Darth Vader, so there's that. I do think that Padme gets points for, the outfits being not just, making her look beautiful, but they're actually well designed too. They're very it's very colorful. It's very a little bit more flamboyant. I mean, she does have the queen makeup, which there's a whole story behind that, but I just really enjoy the whole thing. And also, Keira Knightley did get to play the queen technically, and there was a great game that Star Wars fans like to play. It's called, which is it, Kira or is it Natalie? And I've played this game multiple times, and I have won because I'm one of the more knowledgeable Star Wars fans out there. Anyway, so our next person is somebody from another TV show. I have not actually watched any of the episodes of the show, but I know of it, and that is Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Now, keep in mind that there are two versions of Buffy. There's the TV show version, which is definitely a badass. And then there was a movie that came out before the TV show. In the movie, she is a fluff-headed valley girl that is learning how to kill vampires. It is a very kitsch movie. It is very much one of those B-level horror vampire movies. Somehow it spawned an entire TV series. The TV series did a really good job of developing her character into a more 3D person. And then we got other shows from it, like the Spike series and stuff like that. But the movie itself made her very fluff-headed. So we're talking about the TV show version where she's actually out there killing monsters. Kind of like a female Van Richten or a vampire slayer person.
Eat your heart out, Blade, basically. Well,
Yes.
so there are some who kind of see her as one note, but mainly because they probably only seen the movie, but this is not true. She is basically the monster version of Kim Possible, which I'm really upset with myself that we didn't put that in the honorable mentions. But she battles vampires and other evil forces on a daily basis. And to quote her, "I am the thing that monsters have nightmares about." And she blew up a monster with a rocket launcher, which reminds me of a line from Resident Evil 2 with Claire. "You lose, big guy." And I love that line so much. And then there's another quote, "No weapon forged can stop me." And she says, "That was then. This is now." And she blows up the monster with the rocket launcher. And during one of the episodes, Augustus says, "Take all that away and what's left?" And Buffy's response is, "Me." And keep in mind, as I said before, she has to do this on a daily basis, all the while having to juggle the high school hijinks. And yeah, eat your heart out, Blade. You wish you could be as badass as her. I mean, you are badass, but you wish you could be, high school level of badass. And so, who's our final contender on this list?
Okay, final contender. Other than Princess Leia, this other lady has a very special place in my heart. Scarlet from G.I. Joe. Now we're talking about the comic book, cartoon, and movie version of her. She kind of hits close to home because my dad is a Vietnam vet, and I learned about her through the comics, in the cartoon, and then finally the movies that came out much, much later. But a lot of the storyline in the comics deal with some of the soldiers she's with that were in the Vietnam War and were coming home injured from that. I love that she's a redhead. If you guys can't tell from my icon, I'm also a fellow redhead, and it was so nice to have representation that wasn't blonde or brunette. She has a boyfriend called Snake Eyes. He is an elite soldier / ninja. He trained in Japan. They are partners in all sense of the word. They are some of the first characters I came across in media that use sign language to communicate. Again, we have representation of other communities here. Snake Eyes originally lost his ability to talk in the Vietnam War when he got hit by napalm, which is a horrible, horrible weapon. It burned him horribly, and that's why he's always wearing a mask. Her IQ is so high that she broke the tests that they used to see, how high up the officer pool you get to go. So they had to make some new ones for her. In Special Forces, she's known for her crossbow skills and martial arts. In fact, when you got the action figure that came out in the 80s, she came with her crossbow. She's second in command to Duke in some of the series. In a lot of the series, she might be third or fourth in command, depending on which one you're reading or watching. Duke's in charge. He respects her enough to have her at second command. And there's a platonic relationship between them. They're friends, they're co-workers. But Snake Eyes is her true love. In the first live-action movie, she takes out a Cobra soldier by blowing him up with a crossbow. Again, that's her iconic weapon. She fires all different types of arrows out of it. She'll take on the Baroness. She gets knocked out, but she gives the Baroness a good hard fight. Those two together in the toy line were the holy grail for girls to get their hands on. because very few toy series that were made for boys also had women figures in them. So in the G.I. Joe toy line, we had Scarlet, we had Baroness, we had Lady J, and I think later on there was another one called Jinx.
Yes, yes, there was.
In G.I. Yep. In G.I. Joe Resolute, she says, "I'm going with you." When Duke goes on a mission to Siberia, when she's injured, she stays with him and helps him get onto the jet. And to quote her wiki article, she stands as the only member of the team who has duties that are kept confidential to the rest of the team. Her security clearance is so high, she outranks pretty much not only the President of the United States, but many of the top generals and admirals. If there's UFOs, she knows about them. And in fact, there's even one series in the comics where they fight the Transformers.
Oh yes, the
Um,
crossover. The
during one
crossover.
mission. Yeah, the crossovers are awesome. During one mission, she was captured and held at the Silent Castle, but she managed to escape her cell and overpower Storm Shadow. Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes are rivals. In some series, they're brothers. In others, they just train together at the same ninja temple. But there's a lot of grief going on between the two of them. But they never fight over her because she is her own person, and her and Snake Eyes are definitely a couple.
Yeah, and one thing about the two live action G.I. Joe movies, believe it or not, the guy in the suit that was running around doing all the ninja stuff, that was Ray Park who did the stunts for Darth Maul. So you could say he kind of gone down from a Sith to a ninja, but I thought that was really cool. And also, it's kind of interesting because in the final fight when Snake Eyes is fighting Storm Shadow is using a double-bladed sword staff thing, and I'm like, did you guys do that on purpose just because Ray Park's in the picture? It's like, and also,
Yes. Yes, they did.
and also she is kind of the one that kind of also puts the pieces together a little bit. She like we said, she does have like various like variations on her toy line, but the original is probably the one that's most iconic. And I actually do like the actress who plays her in the first G.I. Joe live action movie. I didn't watch the show when I was younger because I was more of a Transformers, She-Ra kind of person, but I do think it was interesting that G.I. Joe did team up with Transformers. I am disappointed that they didn't do live action crossover with the Michael Bay Transformers, because that would have been really awesome, especially in the first movie. Um, so yeah, that's our list of the most badass women that we can think of and came up with. I think these women deserve their place in the Hall of Fame of badassery for various reasons. They are badass not just because, they're a pretty face. They're a pretty face who can probably kick your ass and probably give a quippy line about it. They are they're iconic, like Leia is iconic. They're iconic in their own way too because they set trends that would carry over to my generation and newer generations. And also, their actions often speak louder than their words. It just goes to show that you can be a pretty face and you can also kick ass and you can also save the day in some cases. Lady Maeve, any final words before we sign off?
I just want our listeners to know that this is just the tip of the iceberg. We picked 10 after debating back and forth, but I know there are so many more out there. So comment below what badass female characters do you think should come up next in our discussion of badass female characters? Maybe down the line we'll do another podcast with another 10. Due to time constraints, we're limiting it to 10 at a time. But if you guys have some suggestions on who you think should be added into the Hall of Fame, let us know. And we hope that everyone is having an awesome week. Stay warm out there. It is chilly everywhere.
And I'm a little disappointed that we didn't do this for International Women's Day, but maybe we'll do that the next episode on that day. Maybe. Who knows? Anyway,
That would be perfect.
see you guys next week.